Um, my name is Joe Eberstein. I'm the director for the Center for Community Research and the San Diego County Marijuana Prevention Initiative. I'm also a member of the SAMHSA Region 9 Prevention Technology Transfer Center, and I'm here with my co-presenter, Patrick Foley, who's a treatment professional and life coach with over 20 years experience working with youth in recovery. So what you have here today is about over 40 years of experience working directly with youth who have substance use disorder and CUD. Let's see. So the agenda today, going to be talking about marijuana has been in the news lately. It's good that it's been in the news lately, but you know, where were the media a long time ago before the industry established itself? We're going to be discussing the terms cannabis as opposed to marijuana, as opposed to weed, and why I use the term marijuana. Potency, products, trends in use and poisonings, public health data, and then cannabis use disorder and some resources I was able to find for Illinois. So let's talk about the terms, because we're going to be using some of these terms interchangeably. And, you know, some of it can be political when you're talking about terms. So I want to just go over why some of the terms are used and others aren't, maybe. So there's generally 2 species, maybe 3, of the cannabis plant. Sativa, which is known to have higher THC concentrations. Indica, which is a fatter leaf that generally has higher CBD. And then there's this ruderalis that they're still deciding on whether or not it is a species. It has very minimal THC. It grows in Eastern Europe and parts of Russia. So when we hear the term weed, you know, going back decades, marijuana used to grow as a weed. It was an invasive species. So that's where it got that term. You know, it grows naturally in Central Asia, and it needs winds to blow the seeds, and it grows everywhere. It was actually a weed that would get into the farmers' crops before they knew what the chemical concentration was, of course. Then we have cannabis. And again, if I'm a person that works in the field of, you know, being a plant specialist, I would use cannabis as a term. It refers to the genus of species. The term I use is marijuana because it's a legal term that refers to a portion of the plant that contains high amounts of THC. These are genetically modified, man-made substances like waxes and oils that are not natural. And then we have hemp, which has been around for industrial use in cordage, and making clothing and rope. It has very minimal amounts of THC and CBD, but these can be synthesized to create other chemicals that we're seeing now, like Delta-8 and THCP. When you hear somebody referring to hybrids, hybrids are a mix of either the indica and sativa or a mixing of other species. When you look at hemp versus marijuana, hemp is noticeably different in the leaves that it has. You can see why it was used for cordage. It has very strong leaves and makes very strong rope. Again, there are about minute amounts of THC, 0.03 or less. But because of the Farm Bill, which was passed in 2018, people have synthesized the CBD and the THC to make chemicals that are psychoactive, like Delta-8. You can see on the right side, marijuana has a fatter leaf. Really, the difference is in the chemical structure of the plant. When we talk about THC, which I'll refer to as the psychoactive chemical in marijuana, or one of the psychoactive chemicals, marijuana has about 400 chemicals in it. THC can be modified and enhanced to enhance the potency. There's crossbreeding, genetic modification, and extraction methods using ethanol, butane to create some of these high potency products. It's important to note too that THC can interact with prescription medications. especially seizure medications and antidepressants. Then we have CBD, which counteracts the THC high naturally in the marijuana plants, can have more of a sedative effect. It can also be modified, and we have the first CBD-derived medicine that was approved by the FDA called Epidiolex to help with a certain subset of seizure disorders called Lennox-Gastaut syndrome. For California recreational use, many of you may know that recreational use in California was passed in 2016. So we've now been in this for about 7 years. This is the symbol for legally tested marijuana products. We still have a thriving black market. People are copying this symbol and putting it on to mimic legally tested products. The label must contain the amount of THC or CBD and include on edibles the actual serving size. And I believe they're 10 milligrams of serving size. Now, the issue with this is that you can go to multiple dispensaries and buy, you know, a huge amount at this dispensary and another huge amount at the other dispensary. They're not really talking to each other. So marijuana is in the news lately. You know, there was this article from Politico, pot is making people sick and Congress is playing catch up. The number of young children who accidentally ate cannabis edibles jumped 1,300% in a 5-year study. This is really presenting itself as a problem. Specifically in San Diego, we have some local data from Rady Children's Hospital about this. And then we've seen Stone, California seniors headed to the ER by the thousands, UCSD. Most commonly, they're going there because of drug interactions. CBD can interact with blood thinners. And again, it can also interact with several other medications. You can go visit a website called drugs.com to see the over 500 interactions between CBD, THC, and over-the-counter medications. So it's been in the news. We've seen reports. There was another report about screen all patients for cannabis use before surgery because they don't react the same way from the anesthesia that somebody that doesn't use marijuana. Patients who regularly use cannabis may experience worse pain and nausea after surgery and may require more opioid analgesia. And then I want to talk about, I hope you can hear this video, the issue of marijuana and mental health issues. So I hope that you can hear this, and let's see if it plays.
Well, September is Suicide Awareness Month, and local doctors are now coming together to inform parents about the risks of marijuana use on youth mental health.
And for more on that, we want to go now to Fox 5's Alani Latan. She is live from the City Heights front about there. Alani.
Good afternoon, Andrew, Maria. And the main thing that doctors want us to walk away with is that they're saying that the marijuana out there today is not like it was a decade or even a few years ago. Experts warn it's stronger and it's getting more young people hooked with a variety of options that are out there, concentrates, edibles, vapes. And because of that, they're saying they're now seeing a link between marijuana use and mental health.
Every day I treat patients who suffer from cannabis use disorder.
We want to make sure that parents and youth are making informed decisions and understand the risks.
Doctors laying out the relationship between marijuana use and youth mental health. They warn cannabis use is a suicide risk factor for people under the age of 25. Adding that cannabis use disorder and daily cannabis use were associated with suicidal thoughts, plans, or attempts in people 18 to 35 years old with or without underlying major depression. The FDA slapping on a warning for people with psychiatric history to avoid even prescription level THC.
People who have a mental illness can exacerbate their condition by using THC.
Experts warn that THC is also getting stronger. The Department of Justice found that the average potency level in marijuana has increased from 8.9% to 17.1% between 2008 to 2017. One parent taking notice of that for his oldest son.
It's often the start of a descent into living
parent says his son got a pilot's license at 17, had academic goals, but quickly became addicted to vaping.
And then things got worse. He abandoned college after one semester, moved back home, smoked nonstop, alienated himself from his friends, spent all his money in much hours, and became truly psychotic.
Doctors warn that high potency THC out there is a risk factor for developing psychosis in youth.
And it can become permanent, even in young people who have no underlying mental illness.
Experts also advise not to shy away from substance use conversations, to instead have the discussion early and often with youth.
Be honest and open with your healthcare provider if you do suspect you. And if there's having a mental health issue, it's really important. The patient, don't think that you're weird.
Son is slowly getting better. Despite 9 months without weed and the same time working a full-time job,
Experts have acknowledged that more research is needed out there to really better understand marijuana use and mental health, especially in youth. But they also warn that marijuana use can interfere with common mental health medications. So that's also something for parents and for youth out there to be aware of. Reporting live in City Heights, I'm Alani Matei, Fox 5 News.
So I'm glad that doctors are, catching up. And I don't mean that facetiously, but, we've been in this fight for public health, in terms of, fighting for public health, and then, watching the marijuana industry with all of their resources kind of just, tumble over us. So I'm glad that they're finally catching on, but, why are we seeing these issues now in the media? Well, we have more access in several states. Several states have gone recreational. We have higher potency products, which we're going to talk about some of those today. The media largely ignored the issue for many years. Part of our contract is to do media, and we would try and pitch stories, and the media thought it was a non-story to talk about anything negative when it comes to marijuana. Then we had COVID coming. COVID overshadowed really everything. If you remember, before COVID, there was this e-cigarette and vaping associated lung injury, which suddenly disappeared and we don't hear anything about anymore. And then the medical community is playing catch up. For many years, we couldn't get one doctor to speak about the harms associated with marijuana. They didn't really know of many. Now we're starting to see the medical community come out with studies like this. More access means more dependence. As for marijuana dependence, referrals to treatment can be higher in states that legally protect dispensaries for both adults and youth. And actually, there's been some wonderful studies I'm so happy to share now, because in the past, we didn't have these resources. So let's talk a little bit about the psychoactivity. So generally in the 80s and 90s, all that was available was the plant material, the bud. The bud is generally from the female cannabis plant. It has the resin leaking out of the bud, and generally the female plant has all of the THC and CBD. So I've seen bud strains nowadays that are upwards of 32%, which is enormously high. The bud in the 80s on the East Coast was maybe 5% to 7%. You have to remember, kids now are starting off their marijuana using journey using 60 to 90%. That's an enormous amount for a developing brain. Edibles and vapes can be upwards of 90%. Many dispensaries locally, and I've been in a few of them, don't sell any products that are less than 50%. And the owner told me that very jokingly. He said, why would anybody drive down to the dispensary for less than 50% THC? I can tell you they're making enormous amounts of money there. So let's talk a little bit about the plant itself, as I alluded to in the last slide. The buds are the flowers of the female plant. There is a male and a female plant. The female plant produces resin secreting buds. They contain chemicals that get you high. Oils and waxes are made using solvents and equipment to extract resin. So if anybody comes up to you and says that marijuana is natural, Look at this slide, it looks more like Frankenstein's lab. Marijuana extraction equipment is worth several $1,000s first. And they use solvents like ethanol, butane, which can cause explosions, CO2, to get all of the resin out of the bud to produce extremely high amounts of THC. So again, if somebody comes up and says this is natural, you just look at some of the equipment that's used to produce these higher strains. We're also getting better at gardening. I mean, if you look at some of these gardening and marijuana, products that are out there to make sure that you're getting a bumper crop. We're getting better with lighting technology, heating, hybridizing, hydroponics, which is growing marijuana in buckets of water instead of soil, which helps faster growth. And then we have better chemicals and insecticides. Marijuana is prone to getting mites. And now that we have these chemicals and insecticides coming out there, they're better at preventing those bugs. So how high is too high? One important thing that I want everybody to know after this is we have absolutely no research that indicates this level of THC is beneficial for any medical condition. Now, the Mississippi Monitoring Project allows the United States basically to study THC strains of up to 12 to 13%. They're not allowed to go above that because it would be an unethical study. So in a way, we're not allowed to study what's actually out there. So this is a problem that I think is being worked out with more research labs being allowed to study higher potency products, which I'm glad for. The purpose of these products is to produce a high, and the increased potency makes them potentially more dangerous, more likely to result in addiction. Again, wonderful studies coming out of NIH, right from 2018 upwards. Along with potency, we have use that's changing too. Very few young people that I know are actually rolling a joint or even smoking it in a blunt. So we now have this issue with vaping. Vaping has become an epidemic. And it was purposely made an epidemic by companies like Juul back in 2010 that advertised heavily on social media. And they're being sued currently by 300 school districts and have had to pay out millions of dollars. They basically created this vaping epidemic. And now one of the main modes that kids are getting marijuana is through vaping and vaping devices. So we have studies like this that say more than 2 million US middle school students reported using cigarettes in 2021. I go to schools all over San Diego, and I can tell you it's the #1 issue when teachers talk to me. The bathroom has become the vaping lounge. Everybody's vaping all over the place. Nobody knows what they're vaping. There's a lot of black market products out there as well. One of the sad but interesting data points is from the Monitoring the Future, which is national data. In prevention, we use this all the time. It's a very good source of data. But in 2019, they noted something they'd never seen before in their 45 years of collecting data. They had the largest single-year increase in both past 30-day use for vaping marijuana and past year use for vaping marijuana. So again, the kids are using a device that delivers high potency marijuana at a faster rate into the bloodstream. How many times are kids hitting the vape pen? A lot of them will tell you they only hit it 8 to 10 times a day, but there was a good study that came out, the Million Puff study, that actually looked into how many times people are hitting the vape pen, and the median number was 132 times. Now you times that by 90% THC, and you don't have a lucid moment all day long to go to school, get your studies done, and go to the gym. These are the devices that we're seeing. Remember the ratio 65 to 95%, because it's about $65 to $95, and it's about 65 to 95% THC. These are preloaded pens, a little bit expensive for a young kid, And again, there's that California symbol that shows that it is a recreational product and there was a chance of it being tested. Vaping versus smoking, there's a great bunch of studies from Johns Hopkins. Vaping marijuana produces a greater psychological and physiological effect. So not only are the potencies getting higher, but now we have a mechanism that delivers more of a psychological and physiological effect compared to traditional smoking methods. Also, they found that THC levels in blood samples after vaping are much greater compared to levels after smoking. This is another big issue I want to kind of go off and talk about a little more in detail is now you can get marijuana infused into lotions, drinks, food, candies that are very appealing to kids. And these fruit candies are presenting a problem specifically in San Diego County with Rady Children's Hospital. I'm going to share some of their data. So many of you know that edibles react differently. Edibles can take longer to feel the effects. Edibles generally contain higher amounts of THC. It takes longer for the body to process edibles, so the high can last longer. And these edibles can interact with driving and prescription medications. Now, you also combine some of the advertising methods and you wouldn't be able to tell the difference between these products and then regular products that aren't infused with THC. A retailer may sell up to 1 ounce of marijuana flower or 8 grams of concentrates. The problem is there's nothing stopping people from consuming the entire package at one time. And if you are a marijuana connoisseur and you're not familiar with it, I probably wouldn't dive into the deep end using edibles. I'd probably go more towards the traditional smoking. Since we are a marijuana destination now in San Diego, we do notice that our ER numbers get higher for people who aren't familiar with these high potency products. So we all saw this coming. What happens when you leave candies outside of the package? And you have a young child that thinks it's a traditional candy? Well, you have more poisonings. Colorado saw this back in 2012 when they were one of the first states, along with Washington, to agree to recreational use. These fruity candies that kids can mistake for regular food products. Small children are at higher risk based on their size and weight. Edible products have a very high amount of marijuana in it. The symptoms are more severe and can result in hospitalizations. Also with children, the first thing they do in the first few years of their lives is put everything in their mouth. So baby feels things with the lips and tongue. They're also relieving pain of teething and exploring the world using that. So a colorful edible is going to look delicious and they're going to put them in their mouths. Also height and weight. Due to the height and weight of children, edible poisoning may be more severe and require hospitalization. Children are also unaware of telling you how much they consume. So the doctors and nurses are really at a loss to figure out. So if you have the package and you do have a child that ate it and unknowingly, bring the package to the ER so you can see how much of the THC is in there. The medical staff can as well. So what happens when children eat THC products? Again, increasing poison control is the result. I'm going to show you some of those numbers. THC poisonings have a variety of symptoms, including seizures, sleepiness, confusion, heart issues, and it can also be mistaken for other illicit substances. In some cases, these kids were given Narcan. So what products are driving the increase? This again is data from analysis from Rady Children's Hospital, specifically Dr. Laub and Alexandra Dubinin. The problem that we're seeing is mostly with the fruit candies. Then the second issue is the chocolates, and then kids drinking the vape juices. Marijuana is seen in breast milk up to 3 to 7 days after the mother uses. So I would encourage everyone, if you're in the prevention field or if you're concerned about this and you have a local coalition, to try and collect some local public health data related to marijuana. We do this with the ICD-10 codes related to hospitals. They usually keep a list of why a person entered into a hospital using these codes. Some of them can be codes like marijuana poisoning, cannabis use disorder, and others. So the Illinois Department of Public Health does have a cannabis page. Here it is. There is data and statistics on it if you want to know about it. They also have links to some really good resources like NIH. The CDC has great information as well, and this page links all of those resources. So I want to talk about treatment, and Patrick is going to get into the treatment numbers, but we've seen an increase nationally from 2016 to 2019 in people that are older than 26 going to treatment. So Patrick and I have these discussions, and I think we would agree that if young people are starting their marijuana journey at around 14 or 15, that they're discovering they're having an issue after 10 years, the marijuana isn't having the same effect. And that's when people generally will start admitting to themselves that the marijuana doesn't have the same effect as it used to. People are seeking out other enhancing type of substances. And this is where that polydrug use and sometimes graduating to other substances like meth and fentanyl can be a problem. So what are the top 5 reasons for our local marijuana related hospital visits? Well, we found that drug interactions were very big, accidents and injury, cannabis hyperemesis syndrome, which is the vomiting syndrome seen in longtime smokers of marijuana. Mental health is a very big one, and then poisonings. Locally, we have about 37 hospital visits a day related to marijuana in our county, and we've seen this number increase. Also, poison control numbers locally have gone up. There's been a 75% increase in marijuana poison control calls since 2016, Prop 64, which legalized marijuana. Since 2011, there's been a 242% increase. So this is an issue. Nationally, poison control numbers are going up as well. Poison calls for mostly edibles. Cases increased during the COVID lockdown. Of course, if you are home with your children and you leave a package of edibles on the table and they look like a fruity candy, or a babysitter does, there's a good chance of your child, who doesn't know any better, is going to consume multiple candies. We also see poisonings going up for CBD. I don't know if a lot of people know that you can become poisoned from CBD. So we didn't have the complete numbers for 2022, but they were on tap. You can see that the issues went up in 2021 when some of us were locked down. As far as Rady Children's Hospital data, they're really keeping track of these incidents. So we've seen an increase in positive urine toxicology encounters at Rady's. And this is children. So you'll see when some of the laws were enacted and the COVID lockdown, you'll see since the COVID lockdown, we've seen a steady increase in these poisonings. So they also did a summary of whose marijuana were they getting into. It turns out it was the moms. What type of marijuana? It was edibles and fruity candy. Where did the exposure occur? At home? How did the children present? Heart arrhythmia, altered mental status, vomiting. 10% of the cases were so severe they required stays in pediatric intensive care. There were CPS reports also issued for some of these cases. You'll see some of the symptoms. The most symptom that we see is sleepiness and fatigue, and then followed by lethargy, vomiting, red eye, dilated pupils. 13 out of the 180 children were asymptomatic. More on the symptoms, the vital signs. Many of them had normal vitals. Some were hypothermic, some were hypotensive. Overall, less than 50% had normal vitals, and then some of them were tachycardic with bradypnea, which is a slower heart rate. I want to talk a little bit about Delta 8, which seems to be a new trend. Now, there's nothing natural about Delta 8. Delta 8 is a synthesized version of CBD from hemp. So the CDC put out a warning back in 2021 about a slew of cases in the Michigan area and Wisconsin that involved Delta 8, and I think you should read this CDC report. It's very interesting in detail. Let's talk about Delta 8 a little bit. So these new chemicals from hemp are a way around the law, around the federal law. Since hemp is legalized for the Farm Bill, now we have scientists creating synthesized versions of THC using the minute amounts of chemicals that are found in hemp. Things like Delta 8, THCP, THCO, you're going to be seeing a lot more of these chemicals coming out, and they're psychoactive. The FDA has a warning regarding Delta 8 as well. Is cannabinoid that we have no studies on human beings about what it does, typically manufactured from hemp, and they have intoxicating effects. Delta 8 gummies, the FDA has received 104 reports of adverse events in patients who consume Delta 8. 77% involved adults and 8% involved pediatric patients. Adverse events included, but were not limited to, hallucinations, vomiting, tremor. Now, this may seem, not serious or funny to people, but, I remember back during COVID, there was this whole movement to de-stress the hospitals and not put any extra stress on the hospitals. Now we have many people experimenting with marijuana using the limited resources that we have. And I'll tell you a story from an emergency room doctor that I know very well. She said that a patient waited in the ER 5 days before they were seen by a doctor. They were getting food delivered to the ER. That's how bad our wait times are for emergency room services here in San Diego. Delta 8 exposures, National Poison Control. One child actually died from this. And you can read, again, the FDA has great warnings about this. Now, we don't know much about Delta 8 because the coding wasn't there to track it before January 2021. So we don't know if Delta 8 was around before then. The FDA did send out letters. And once I get into the resources and talk about things that you can do as treatment and prevention people. So the one thing the FDA is really big on is going after companies that claim medical benefit that aren't tested with false claims of medical benefits. So they did send warning letters to dispensaries and businesses claiming that CBD was curing cancers and something else, and then Delta 8. Why the FDA letters? Because of an uptick in adverse reports to a nation's poison control. And then for the Delta 8, concerns regarding contamination due to methods of manufacture. When you're manufacturing some of these liquids and you don't get enough of the butane out of it or the ethanol, we don't know what that does to your system as well. Another reason for the poisonings is that kids are attracted to the vape juice itself. And this can be very, very serious because some of these vape juice contain as much nicotine as 20 packs of cigarettes. So if something has a watermelon type flavor or a vanilla flavor and a child is there, they may want to drink the e-liquid. Also, touching it can be a problem since liquid nicotine can get into the skin and cause poisoning. There are many other chemicals inside the cartridge as well that people are unaware of that we don't know what does to people. We think that the vitamin E acetate was a reason for the E-valley, but we still don't know. And then we have propylene glycol, which is the reason why vaping mist machines at discos back in the 80s created that fog. We don't know what that does to a human being consuming all of that day in and day out. And then as far as black markets products, you always have to worry about, does the label match the contents? That's a big thing. And there's a slew of black market products. The black market seemingly never goes away here, unfortunately. I know that was something that the industry promised us, but they're actually doing record numbers. Some say that 75% of sales in California are still black market sales. Let's talk about some resources, and then we're going to transition into Patrick's presentation, take a deeper dive into cannabis use disorder. So I did look on the Illinois Department of Human Services for some sort of access and crisis line if you need treatment. This is a great page and good phone numbers to access treatment and help. Here in San Diego, we have an access and crisis line. You dial 211 and you can get connected with a variety of resources, which is very cool. San Diego County also has a vaping protocol for disposing these. I don't know if everybody's aware that these devices are considered hazardous waste because of the battery and the cartridge. It is unsafe to be tampering with the batteries since they have a tendency to explode still. And then the cartridge itself, you don't really want to be messing with and getting some of that liquid. So if you are a school or some kind of establishment that has kids and you need to take these devices away, there's a couple of things to remember. Always wear gloves. Never throw them in the garbage, never, flush them down the toilet. Don't handle them with your bare hands because they could contain other substances. Transport to a hazardous waste disposal site. And again, I know this seems like, well, just for a vape pen, they are actually considered hazardous waste. They're not good for the environment. We did a project here in San Diego recently about asking the general public, what did they know about drug interactions in marijuana? Well, it was very interesting when we did these surveys and we found out that over 50% would like information like this, over 90% actually, over 50% use THC and CBD. And they were unaware of any of the interactions. So we did this in coordination with 17 local pharmacies. They handed out these info cards in English and Spanish and with a survey to find out more information. So we're hoping that some of these policies at the state level will include labels around drug interactions and mental health. Common drugs that cause interactions are sedatives, anti-anxiety medication, antidepressant medications, pain medications, blood thinners. And again, it's always important to inform your doctor. I think doctors now are more open about the issue, and I think it's important to talk to them about your use. Again, there is drugs.com to use. It's a free resource if you want to check out the over 500 drug interactions between CBD and THC. If you're unsure about anything that I'm saying, I always advocate for ask your doctor. Always talk to your doctor about any substance. Talk to your doctor about many times you're using alcohol. Usually they'll be able to tell by looking at the blood test for alcohol. Unless they're specifically looking for THC, they're probably not going to find it in a general blood test. But you can all, with alcohol, you can check the liver counts and all of that. Remember, there may be unknown ingredients and chemicals in the products that do not appear on the label. So some procedures that you could do as a college or a school, when these products are seen and cause a problem, do you document the incident? Does the school have a protocol to take pictures of the product? What were the symptoms? Did the parents and staff get alerted to this? And this is a teachable moment, really. What sort of interventions are available? Here in San Diego, we offer something called teen recovery centers at the school so that parents don't have to drive cross country to access treatment. So that was a really neat thing. I think colleges could do the same thing. We are advocating for child-proof packages. These are resealable packages that make it very difficult for children to get back into once the package is open. Some things to remember is do not use in front of children, store away from children, do not leave individual candies or products outside of the wrapper. if your child does come in contact with these, take the package to the emergency room so you can show the medical staff how much the THC was in there. You can make a complaint as well as a citizen to FDA complaint system. You know, if you see that some of these chemicals are being marketed to help with medical conditions and there are no studies about it, they'll usually send a letter. It's very easy to make a complaint. Here is the California complaint system, and I know that Illinois has a complaint system as well. One of the resources that we're a part of and anybody can join is called ISAC, the International Academy on the Science and Impact of Cannabis. It's a non-political group that advocates for public health policy when it comes to marijuana. You can join their mailing list at isaac1.org. They have a wonderful medical library about what marijuana does to different parts of the body. They also have a webinar series that's free to access. And by the way, this is an advertisement in the Wall Street Journal pushing back at the industry a little bit. Some data and resources. I'm not sure if everybody knows about the adolescent brain cognitive study. This is a study, one of the largest longitudinal studies that's going on among kids. Happens to be based in San Diego, but they're looking at kids all over the country. The CDC has a new cannabis strategy. National poison control data is excellent. We have the new 2022 HIDA report. HIDA is high intensity drug trafficking area. Every area in the US is covered by a HIDA, and they usually put out a report. NIDA has great resources as well. Some of the focus trainings that MPI will be doing. We used to do a lot of trainings around, you know, speaking to kids. And we realized that doing these one-hit wonders wasn't necessarily helping the issue. Yes, it's important to talk to kids, but if we can build the staff to be capable of doing these presentations on their own, because a one-hit wonder is something, but having it done multiple times with staff that's trained, especially when it comes to vaping. I know Patrick will talk about this, and we talk about it all the time. Kids are not getting suspended anymore. Kids are not really facing a lot of consequences when you know, staff come across these devices. So it's very difficult to use any other method other than educating and preventing. We're also doing a lot of parent nights. What we find is that parents are using with their kids, which is shocking to some people, and it may not be. Some people will actually, when the vape pen is confiscated from the school, will ask for the vape pen back, which is shocking again too. But this is the times we're living in right now. We do have MPI resources. And again, we started a new drug driving campaign, Vision Zero, new MPI 2021 report as well. So I'm going to end by saying that I gave sort of a background about some of the products and some of the products that are causing not only CUD, cannabis use disorder, but why it's happening quicker, how it's affecting our emergency rooms, and how it's really not tested for human consumption at this point, which is the scariest thing, actually. So I am going to transition to my co-presenter, and let me stop sharing.
Share our experience. Thank you, Annabelle, for sharing, allowing us to share our experience, strength, and hope. Good morning, everybody, and thank you, Joe, for the introduction and your amazing presentation. I'm gonna cover cannabis use disorder from a treatment perspective, also from somebody who comes from a wealth of experience with treatment in regards as a substance use disorder counselor myself. I was a director for 10 years at an outpatient setting for adolescents and my perspective of working one-on-one with, I call them clients and or patients, and how I've watched people grow, and I've watched people really struggle with this drug of choice. I call it a drug of choice because if you put 3 different substances on a table, this is something that they would pick every single time, or it's the only one that they would pick. Yesterday, I checked in with Joe about this presentation, and we got into a discussion about how serious cannabis use in San Diego County and in California is, and the seriousness of kind of like the epidemic that's going on, where I see massive amounts of people using, and not only using, but constantly staying what we like to call stuck in moments of smoking. Joe mentioned vape pens, and I would say that the reason why this is coming to mind as I look over my agenda is that, you know, the vape pen is leading. It's a higher potency product that's leading to dependence faster than anything in cannabis, marijuana, pot, weed related than I've ever seen. So I have 20 years of experience working with adolescents and transitional youth, ages 12 all the way to 35. Drug of choice, marijuana, and I address it as cannabis. That's what the DSM-5 talks about. So just as a start to my PowerPoint, that's why I continue to say cannabis. But in relation, we're talking about marijuana as a drug of choice and how serious it is. So again, my agenda will cover CUD, what it is, how we treat it. I'm also going to look at mental health components of CUD and the seriousness of that in a co-occurring disorder, which when we're assessing and bringing people into outpatient, inpatient treatments, it's one point to say somebody is actively participating in their use, and then seeing them come off of marijuana and seeing if they can stay stopped, and if there's not that mental health component, which sometimes there is and sometimes there isn't. So when I mention co-occurring disorder, that's what I'm talking about, that the patient, client, person has not only a SUD diagnosis, substance use disorder diagnosis, cannabis dependence and or use, but they also have the mental health component, which is extremely overwhelming for them. And the thought is, when I stop using, is my mental health going to be okay? Is my anxiety, my fear, my nervousness, how am I going to stop those things? And kind of this question that I get all the time from active clients that I personally work with is, what am I going to do, right? How am I going to be able to stay stopped, work at my job, pay my bills? And before you know it, everybody, the conversation's ended, and they're screaming about how they can't just see themselves without being able to actually get high. And I constantly get told this: you're perfect, Pat, so you don't get it. My personal experience in my own recovery, which I'll get to in a second, is I share my experience, strength, and hope with them, and they say, you'll never understand how I feel because you don't do drugs, you don't drink. And that term perfect Pat, one guy called me, and I'll tell you why. Because I constantly keep things simple. I talk about truth, which means that I remove barriers in people's lives. We come up with simplistic goal lists that sometimes people struggle with. So that's why I get a lot of pushback on I hear this often from a gentleman that I work with. Okay. He's my client. He says, there's not always a solution to every problem. I don't disagree with him. That's his truth. What I simply do is show him some solutions to the problem that he's currently in, which is really a struggle for him. So like Joe introduced me, and I've been working in the field for over 20 years. I'm a frequent speaker, not just on marijuana, but on treatment itself, also on alcohol addiction. and fentanyl. So I'm on a regular basis seeing clients for all three. But today we're talking about cannabis, and my goal is to use solution-based information to get them through the process of starting recovery. Not that they will stay clean and sober for the rest of their life in a 12-step program, but with the help of myself and a whole group of people, therapists, outpatient setting, inpatient setting, halfway houses, or what we like to call in San Diego, sober living environments. This is an opportunity for them to stay focused on what they can do today and not so much living and projecting in the future. And a lot of the times clients have a really hard time with this one thing. And I got to tell you, people who are not addicted to marijuana, alcohol, and other drugs have a hard time with staying in the moment, staying in today. You know, today is Wednesday, and in San Diego, it's 9 o'clock, right? But people who suffer from CUD have a horrendous time with taking somebody who used for 1.5 years straight, right? Or 4 years or 5 years, or maybe they're 25 and they've been using since they were 15. I hear that all the time. So 9 to 10 years of actively smoking marijuana to stopping. And now they're in their first 30 days and you're trying to present them with all these goal-oriented ideas. I'm going to tell you, you're going to get a kickback and it's not going to be nice. So I kind of stated my treatment experience. I currently work for a nonprofit where I'm a director and I oversee many programs that are adolescent based. But my life coaching journey, which is a coaching consultant business that I run, it's really to meet people where they are the day before they go into treatment, stay with them while they're in treatment, meaning communicating with them on the phone and meeting them in person, and then helping them transition out. That's the gist of that. And my path to recovery, I got sober many years ago, and I'm from the class of 1999, as we like to call it. I got sober young, so I was 16 when I got sober. I share that with you to say that was my journey to start in the recovery field, my own experience, and then 2 years of sobriety, I started working in an outpatient setting with adolescents. And the difference from the clients that I was working with back then to today, the potency of cannabis has grown immensely. So I started working in 2003, an outpatient setting. I was 19 years old. And what I was witnessing back then was a lot of teens were using because it was in their environment. And Joe touched on this a lot. Sometimes you're a product of your environment, and sometimes the families do not use it all. So that means that there's two parts. One, they are around it all the time. So either their older brother, sister, or their guardians or parents are smoking. So they're around it. And at some point they started using. But what I witnessed and what I heard a lot about was that this is my 6th, 7th year of using. And I would say that I'm addicted, which is a word that I no longer use in my PowerPoints. I use the word dependence. And the reasoning is because the negative connotation of the word addiction. So I'm not saying that it's not utilized anymore in the treatment field here. It's just something that I switched. And the reason is that I still actively run groups in an outpatient setting. And I still facilitate one-on-ones with a lot of people. So what I want them to do is to be able to come to the next session. My goal is to whatever I pitch to them, whatever I'm helping them with, is so that they can see me as a confidant and build trust. So Joe really hammered what cannabis is. I will not go do a deep dive. I wanted to kind of relate to the cannabis use disorder, that cannabis refers to the dried flower leaves and the stems of the cannabis plant. Most cannabis users smoke, my experience. I do know that a lot of them do partake in edibles, but these are seasoned people who actively use them on a regular basis, experience has been that these are seasoned people in the cannabis use. So these are people who have used for a long time and they partake and they kind of go in an ebb and flow. Sometimes they smoke and they use edibles, but my experience has been it's not something that they do on a regular basis. Most of them tend to smoke either the leafy green or they're using the vape devices, which you'll see on one of my high potency slides, but Joe really covered those vape devices. And if I could talk about, this main point, 3 in 10 people who use cannabis have CUD and they're unable to stop using, even though the product is causing problems in their life. Now, if you ask treatment providers like myself, what are problems? We could go down a whole list of issues that I could pull out of a conversation with the person. Now, to get them to see that is very difficult. And here's what I hear often after 20 years, there's been a common thread. Marijuana is not a problem. It's not a drug. I don't have an issue with stopping. I just don't want to stop. I'm only stopping now because I'm asked by my probation officer, by a court order, or by CWS that I can't see my kids and or drive with a positive marijuana test. But that doesn't mean I'm addicted or I'm dependent. I'm just stopping because of that. Now, if you hear what they say, I don't have an issue. I'm not dependent on marijuana or addicted to it. I like to smoke every day. I'm only stopping because I'm asked to stop. So therefore, they're telling me that they have the power over use. And I would say that a lot of the times, and I'm going to make my point clear, is a lot of the times people who are addicted to substances have lost the power of choice in use. And I feel like with cannabis, it's often the case. Cannabis is extremely addictive, meaning that you have to use more to get the same effect. And I see a lot of them become dependent faster now because the potency is higher. I met with somebody who was 15 years old and I had him as a client for about 90 days. So I would say it was typically treatment episodes are about a 90-day retention. And what I witnessed with him was he said that the very first time he ever smoked was with the oils that are 60 to 90% THC. So take somebody who's 15 years old, now tack 14 months onto that. So that's 1 year and 2 months of use. And he had this pen and he was constantly using it. So where these people back in 2003 were 7 years in, 5 to 7 years in, okay? And saying, yeah, you know what, I bet I'm addicted to it. Yeah, I can see I use every day. Well, how often do you use every day? Well, I smoke 3 blunts, couple bong loads a day, right? Now to you guys in the crowd and to me and Joe, to hear somebody say I smoke 3 blunts a day and 2 to 3 bong loads, I'm thinking, whoa, that's a lot. First thought that comes to my mind is that's a lot of money. How does somebody at 17 afford that much marijuana? Now, I don't know if you guys have heard about California recently, but the price and cost of living of everything here and in the United States has gone through the roof. So here I'm hearing active users say, well, if I got 5 things I need, right? And then there's 5 things I want, I'm going to subtract those wants because I really, really need my marijuana. So therefore they're balancing that checkbook. And I got to tell you, it's an expensive habit. Those cartridges are anywhere from $40 to $60 for one cartridge, right? And just like this 50-year-old, how I'm tying into the story, I'm sure you guys are reading my mind of this. How are you affording a vape cartridge that costs anywhere from $45 to $65, right? In this county with no job, right? So the answer I got was, I have an allowance, I work for my parents, I do this, I do odd. I said, okay, that could be totally true. Sometimes I got to believe what they say. And then I said, so tell me how many times do you hit this pen? Now, THC is a psychoactive chemical. Joe covered that immensely. It's as simple as it could be. So if that's the case, and the leafy greens 20 to 30%. Now, top shelf is probably 32%. That means it's the most expensive weed you're going to find at the dispensary, right? It's going to be the cleanest, the nicest looking, the best smelling, right? Well, let's say the average is about 20%. Back in 2003, if you knew the dealer, or in California, like to say, if you knew Snoop Dogg or Dr. Dre, you could find 15% THC chronic. But if you didn't, you were probably smoking anywhere from, I don't know, 5 to 7 to 10%. So think about that. You can find 20 to 30% just for the leafy green here in California today. Joe and I could go to the dispensary right down the street and get it, right? So the point was, this gentleman's 15 years old, 14 months in of using, and he's using an oil that probably had anywhere from 78 to 85% THC. So he's not only dealing with the idea that 14 months in, he's already dependent on marijuana and what we used to call addicted, to now he has to stop or he's going to be expelled from school. So that was the part of the story that I had kind of left out. And so he's sitting in my class and I'm teaching him simplistic, tools and a recovery program so that he can move on. 15 years old, he's a freshman. So a freshman in high school, he's already going to get expelled. That means he's going to have to go to a non-traditional school. That means his parents and his family are all going to know that he doesn't go to regular high school, and all based off what? He couldn't stop smoking marijuana on campus. So even during school, he was tapping his pen. Now, Joe covered this. It's odorless. In a sense, it looks like this pen that I'm holding up, and it's tapping. So I asked him, how many times do you tap, tap, tap your pen a day? He couldn't give me an answer, which told me that he does it frequently. And I would say probably more than 20 times a day. Now, if you're sitting here saying, who does that? A lot of people do. And it has blown my mind to think all day long, you're tapping this pen that has that much THC and what it produces. So it's not when they're high that's concerning to me. It's when they're not high that they're caught in that squat. That's what I see, because they kind of have like a plateau, they're okay. And before they go down, they come back up real fast. So in a sense, everything's encompassed. They're eating, sleeping, they're participating. And the phone that Joe and I talk about all the time, everything that's on that phone is, and for them, it relates to marijuana somehow. And on their TikTok, I don't know if any of you guys has TikTok, I do not. But when you go on it, when you slide through, it's like everything's jumping out at them. So it becomes their normal life, is my point, right? But in California, at the federal level, cannabis is illegal at the federal level, right? It's legal for adults, but still illegal, harmful for youth. So how does he get it? It's really, friends, it's not hard to get it in the black market. And I actually got him to tell me, I said, if you're 15 years old and you have this massive habit, how long does it take for you to get through that, little canister? And he said, anywhere from 1 to 2.5 days. So again, expensive habit. But then he was telling me that on the black market, he could get, vape cartridges for $30. You saw that slide that Joe had where it showed this huge, it looked like a chemical lab where they have this, machine that costs $180,000. So my thought is that why are you getting this, vape device that's $30? I don't know where it was made. I broke down to him a lot of things. What's scary for public health is the fact that he's using marijuana for a very simple reason, because he likes the effects produced by it. Although they say that there's problems that come with it. They're not telling you about their paranoia, their anxiety, the fact that they can't even sleep at night and they have to hit their pen or smoke a bowl before they go to sleep. And some, just like cigarette smokers and addiction to cigarette smokers, is they're waking up from being totally in REM sleep and they're thinking, why am I awake? I got news. It's not because they want a bowl of cereal. It's because they need to get high and then they're going to go back to sleep. So it's almost like the body and the mind is also addicted to the motions, the getting, using, and finding ways. So in a sense, it's very much like a ritual, and it's overwhelming. As a treatment provider, I can tell you it's very overwhelming because my groups are packed, and there are a lot of success stories, but for the success stories that they have, there's a lot of stories where basically people don't want to change, that they're punching a ticket in treatment, they're taking in what you got, but they're ready to use again. So it's not the treatment providers, it's not me, it's not the psychiatrist, it's not the therapist. It's really talking about drugs as a whole, marijuana as a whole and how it's basically engulfed someone's life to the point where they're going to say, hey, I'm going to smoke and for my whole life, you know, which is this point right here. They struggle to find a way out and becomes enemy number one. And it's very true, you know, tolerance breaks, withdrawal management, geographical moves, escape tactics. Tolerance breaks, the very first time I ever heard that came from a guy who said, you know, I've been smoking marijuana for over 5 years. Yeah, it's been about 5 years. I started smoking as a freshman and now I'm 18. And here's the thing, you know, I've never said this in a group setting before. I said, well, go ahead. Now, I didn't know what he was going to talk about. I thought maybe he was going to talk about a traumatic event. And this was a traumatic event. He said, I cannot get high on what I'm smoking anymore. So what I did was I took a tolerance break. And I literally almost fell out of my chair because I was like, he's really going to tell this group of kids something. And I'm so shocked that he was going to get right into the nitty gritty. And he was going to say, I've gotten so high off this potency that I'm not getting high anymore. So I'm going to quit smoking that for 2 weeks. Now, he didn't say I was going to stop smoking for 2 weeks and kind of give my body a break. He said, I'm going to smoke the less potent product, right? So that when I go back to the higher potency product, I can get high or get that feeling again. And I said I fell out of my chair because I looked around the room. There was probably 8 to 10 kids in there, teenagers. And you could see the look on their faces where they kind of were like, one guy was like, dude, be quiet. Why are you telling this guy all of our stuff, meaning our little secrets of what we do, right? And the other kids were relating to him. Some of their eyes lit up because they were saying, well, I haven't tried that yet, or you can't get high like me, meaning that they were a little shocked on the fact that they were too smoking so much weed that they couldn't get high anymore. So some have asked me in these presentations, so what does that mean? Similar to alcohol, the alcohol and marijuana, using so much or drinking so much that basically you're just drinking and smoking, but you're not really hitting that, you know, that ecstasy part or that plateau where you basically feel like, okay, I'm finally high. I feel like here I am, or now I'm drunk and I'm right where I need to be. It's kind of like you never really take off. You kind of just stay right here stagnant. I've worked with a lot of teens for a long time. Cannabis is the primary drug of choice since 2005. And what that means is data research shows that when people are admitted into programs, and I'm going to go and do a deep dive into assessment, diagnosis, and proper placement for cannabis use disorder, but these high-risk groups, that means for the last 10 years, the data shows that our outpatient treatment facilities, the #1 drug of choice, go figure, has been marijuana. Now, I've been working in outpatient setting since 2003. So that means that before the legalization in California, San Diego, it was still the #1 drug of choice. I'm not shocked that it still is the #1 drug of choice. Now, I throw this fun fact out for everybody, okay? That in our adult treatment facilities, okay? So that's 18 to 25. The #1 drug of choice right now is methamphetamine/fentanyl. So there is a big thought, and I hope that we're going to come back and do another presentation on fentanyl, because what I hear from massive amounts of people when they get clean and they walk away from methamphetamine and what we like to call in San Diego, let's say hardcore drugs, methamphetamine and fentanyl, is the first time they ever got high was when they were, and the story goes 12, 13, 14, and they smoked marijuana and or cigarettes. So I will not use the gateway drug thought or theory. I will just say that you just don't wake up one day and say, I'm going to start smoking methamphetamine or fentanyl. Okay. So if you're actively using from 15 years old as a freshman, 14 months later, you've done nothing but hit a vape pen that's 60 to 90%, and you can't get high anymore, and you continue your use and you turn 18, guess what happens? You get kicked out. Mom and dad have had enough. I've heard this story many times. I've been at the apartment where somebody's getting kicked out and I am the said life coach. And they said, what am I going to do? I'm freaking out. When mom and dad cut off the bank account, you lose the car. What's my point? It leads to higher risk behaviors after they turn 18. That's why our outpatient drug treatment facilities in San Diego County are flooded with drug of choice, methamphetamine. And I believe Joe touched on this, but the homeless issue here in San Diego, it's an issue. and we're striving as a county to help out, but it's a non-housed adults is a big issue. Common theme and thread for them: massive drug and alcohol use and dependence and mental health disorders. Okay. So here's the change that I'm going to go through. Cannabis use disorder: what is an assessment, the diagnosis process, and the proper placement. What's a CUD counselor? It's really to treat people with a substance use disorder in a setting where they come and they feel like it's a trusted place, safe place with a positive environment, surrounded by others that are trying to attain the same thing that you're trying to do. Stay abstinent 1 day at a time, 3 to 4 groups a week, and you're meeting people who seem to be happy to see you. And I spoke about my own recovery, and when I got sober, not too many people were happy to see me, and I had a PO that was not a very nice guy, and you know, I had time hanging over my head, so that meant that if I didn't go to group, I was going to have a consequence. So when I walked into treatment and I heard people say, "Hey Patrick, how you doing today? Hey, sign in and take a seat," and I looked to my right and I looked to my left, and people were like, "Oh, hey, my name's so and so, and my name's so and so." The goal of treatment is to provide a safe place for them to grow and look at their own goals as a success. You know, what we gauge for success goes to the client's needs. Okay, so the assessment process is a 2-part process. One is a screening, and then the assessment, the assessment itself. So we do a pre-screening over the phone. Now, when we do a pre-screening over the phone, it's so that when the person comes in, we're making sure, and drug treatment facilities, they're well-oiled machines. So we want to make sure that when we're taking the call, we're asking some simple questions. What's the reason for you wanting to schedule an intake? And most of the time, I would say about 65% of the intakes or the calls we take for assessments over the phone are self-referred. These are people that want to come to treatment on their own accord. I would say about 65%. The other percentage are usually from law enforcement involvement, probation, and or school-based referrals, CWS referrals. So Child Welfare Services got into a house, they see some kind of use from an adolescent, and they give a referral. So we see that, but most are self-referred, people who want to get better, looking at that, you know, hey, I'm not getting high anymore, and I'm really struggling. I got lack of motivation. So we do that first initial screening, and then the assessment is the second part. It's an evaluation that looks at your history, how long you've been using. So really, in a sense, just because the 15-year-old I talked about, it took them 14 months to get to an outpatient setting at a school level, that doesn't mean that in a shorter period of time, somebody can end up in, you know, treatment, which we see a lot of the times. A lot of the signs and symptoms that I've witnessed and really tried to work with, and I go to a current client that I'm working with. This is I'm going to see him today. When I talk about lack of motivation, here's a guy that he doesn't leave his house for days at a time because he'll say, "Well, what's there to do? I can't use and or drink, or I get kicked out of this apartment. I can't find a job because of my record. So I've just sat in my room and done nothing for 3 days," right? Now, I am not there. There's no camera in his apartment, so I don't know if that's the whole truth and nothing but the truth. But what I can tell you is this, is that it looks like he hasn't left his apartment for a few days. And the same guy that I knew when he was actively smoking marijuana on a regular basis is a total different guy, and they call it kind of like a Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. You get 2 sides of the personality, right? Plus he has a co-occurring disorder. So all of these things that I've listed are very important, especially the anxiety part. He suffers from massive anxiety that, what does my life look like, you know, if I don't have marijuana? And what we call in treatment, they feel like they'll look like the hole in the donut, where they're just empty. They don't have a purpose. All the people in my social network of friends, all they do is use. So what am I going to look like if I'm not using and or drinking with them? Now, staying at your apartment 2 to 3 days in a row, some would say, especially with co-occurring disorder, that there might be some nervousness and paranoia to go outside. In his apartment, he has 2 fans going. He has the fan above the oven going, and he has the fan in the bathroom going. So I walked in one day and I turned the fans off, and I'm giving you a real life story. Okay. He flipped out on me and said, "These are my fans, don't touch them." And then finally, when I got him to calm down, I asked him, I said, "So tell me," and this was the withdrawal, constant withdrawal. So he kept using, this wasn't somebody who stayed abstinent, right? Currently today, I don't know if he's smoked any marijuana, but I know in the last week he has smoked the vape pen. And I asked him if he could tell me the name brand of the vape pen that he had. And he did, and I looked it up. So he's at like 87% THC with a co-occurring disorder, right? And here's where I'm getting to. His irritability when it's not when he's, like I said, it's not when they're using that's the concern. It's when you're not using that it's the concern. So I walk in, me turning the knob on the door and shutting the door wrong, I'm going to get jumped on. I'm going to get pounced on, right? Not literally, but he's going to say, "Why'd you shut the door so loud? I got neighbors upstairs." So here's where he's at. His nervousness, his anxiety, his paranoia has gotten so great. I've been working with his therapist, and his psychosis is rising, that he feels like that if he keeps the fans on, not only in the kitchen, and he keeps the drapes covered, and then in his bathroom, the person upstairs that can hear everything that he says, it might kind of muffle what he's saying. Okay, that's the first part of the conversation I had with him. As I started diving deep with him, I realized that there was more there. One day I was sitting in his room because he wouldn't meet with his psychiatrist and his therapist on a Zoom call. He wouldn't leave his apartment. So I asked all the professionals, I said, "Hey, I'm here. I'm going to kick my shoes off, and we're going to do this session right here in his room." And what happened was, as we're sitting in his room, I asked him if there was something else that was going on, and there was. So there is somebody upstairs that he hears on a regular basis talking to him. Okay. And I don't know those things. And if you're working with clients, the best suggestion I could give you is when they tell you those things, don't look shocked. Okay. Don't do a jaw drop. Don't put your hands on your hips. Don't do anything that's going to mimic a reaction, because you close the door to future conversations of what's going on. And I've left the door wide open. The door's not even on the hinge. The door is wide open. I said, "You can tell me anything you want." Okay. And he's told me that there's a woman that lives upstairs and that talks to him on a regular basis. And here's what she says to him. Every single thing that he thinks about himself, okay, all the bad, every wrong decision he made, every wrong turn that he took, every single time he got in trouble from a little boy into his adolescence when he started using until today, somehow she knows it all and she's condemning him, and she repeats things on a regular basis. So this is the thing. This is extremely real for him. So when I'm there, he'll ask me this, and this is a tough part to being a professional. And I'm sharing this with you, is when he says, "I can hear her talking right now," and there's silence. And then he looks at me and says, "Can you hear her?" Now, you guys, I cannot hear anybody. I've never been able to hear anybody, and that's okay. But I simply state what I believe to be true. And I say, "I cannot hear anybody upstairs. I know you can hear them. I'm sorry. I wish I could." And he's gotten mad at me to where he's kicked me out of his apartment, because he wants me to say, at least, "Okay, tell me I'm not crazy, that I'm not hearing that." Drug of choice, cannabis, massive amounts. Here's a guy who, when I say tap the pen, he taps the pen all day long. On top of that, he has a very, very, very long history of drinking on a regular basis. And another thing that's raising his anxiety through the roof is he's smoking elf bars. You can look this up online. You can see them all over the place. And it has, I don't know, 4,000 puffs or something. And he sits there and he taps that. So, think about that for one second when we're looking at diagnosis, right? And we're doing these assessments with guys like my client. He's actively smoking marijuana, tapping his pen, has, anywhere from 80 to 90% THC, high potency, very strong, causes more of a head high than a body high. Then he's tapping his tobacco pen, and he's drinking. So this is why you get kind of like that roller coaster. And I don't like using that analogy, but it really is true, because he's always on this up and down of these feelings. Now, ask this guy one question or mention somebody that he dislikes a lot, which would be like his dad. And you better wear a football helmet into his apartment, because he's going to throw something at you. That's why you never know kind of where he's going to be and what he's going to do. He's actively had jobs, you name Burger Kings, McDonald's, Subways, sandwich shops, and they're short-lived because he's going on that roller coaster, you know. And in his normal life, smoking weed, drinking, and hitting some kind of tobacco, that's his normal life. So guess what, ladies and gents, when he has work at 8 o'clock in the morning, on his way there, he's smoking weed and he's putting back a couple brews before he walks in. So imagine showing up to work and working with him. You guys are all showing up at the same time, and there he is. So these are just a long list of him writing his story. And I really feel like he's at a jumping off place, meaning that he's going to change soon, because the older you get, the harder it is to listen to your story and say out loud. And I'm being extremely candid with you guys. Everything in my past has nothing to do with me. It has everything to do with my dad, my mom, and everything they did to me. But I share this with you, this finger pointing, is that he continuously points the finger at everybody and everything, all these things, but he's got 3 fingers pointing back at him. And the older the users get, it's really hard to continue to pin it on everybody else rather than taking ownership that they were a part of it the whole time. And currently today, he is the main reason why he's still stuck in the squat, why he just can't seem to get up at the right time. He always gets tight at the wrong time, and tight means he gets high at the wrong time. When some important appointments to be met, or he's got to be at work, it seems like that always is at the wrong time, right? And I said, hey, I just want you to know, so everybody on this call, me included, and Joe, you don't drink 5 beers before you go to work. And on top of that, smoke, a blunt right before you walk in, and then your manager's right there, and you go, hey, how you doing today, right? I don't do that either as Joe. I know some people do that have those issues, but I try and convey to a lot of my clients, you got to keep things simple. You got to do the do's and the don'ts. And let's talk at 3 o'clock. And why I say that is because sometimes they take little bits of what you say. So I get a wealth of information. So we try not to bombard them. I thank you for letting me tell that part of the story with current clients, because I want you guys to know that I'm actively working with people. This isn't something I did 10 years ago, and it's very serious what's going on in this county and other ones, and my heart goes out to you guys who are working and or, family members that are suffering from these things as well. It's devastating. So let's go into diagnosis. So in order to appropriately diagnose a patient, most of us utilize a 2-part assessment. The ASAM criteria. So this is a comprehensive set of guidelines for anybody that's working in the treatment field for placement, continued stay, or discharge of the patients, so that we can transfer them somewhere else. Because usually the main part about getting somebody where they need to go is treatment is we're here, but there also is an idea that in 6 months is going to come really fast. You're going to blink and it's going to be June. So we want to make sure that now we're talking about that time, not like it's some dream. It's like, hey, it's going to be June soon. So you are here today, but we want to kind of see where you're going to be in 3 months. And then in 6 months, what would you say? Would you say that maybe you'd still be an outpatient and be around healthy people, making healthy decisions? And a lot of the times they get so excited about what's going on that they say, yeah, I could see myself here. Yep, I could do that, and there's also the biosocial assessment. So this may include the medical history, so we get to know them better, their physical history, and of course their substance use history. What our goal is in there is to get them prepared for proper placement. We talk about mental health and treatment history because sometimes they say, well, I've never been in therapy, and I don't know what that looks like. But my family member, and they go on a long list of family members that have suffered from some kind of mental health disorder that maybe they didn't even know what it was, but they talk about it in there. That's documented. So when the therapist meets them one-on-one, they can kind of see patterns of what they went through. And we're trying to identify trauma. What was the trauma they experienced? It doesn't matter what age, so that we can actively help them today. We can't help them back then. So we don't live in the past. And I say that often. The past doesn't exist. Okay. When we're dealing one-on-one with people in a group setting, the past doesn't exist. All we have is now, and the future. It's so overwhelming. It's like a tidal wave, right? But people get pulled so far in the past that they get stuck there. And then they get stuck there. And my experience has been this, is that they get stuck there and then they take what happened to them and they kind of pet it, right? And it becomes their story and their identity. So we try and break that identity to get them to build anew, right? To say, I'm so sorry that happened to you. Let's identify what it was. And then let's see if we can get some help to get you to the next level. But once we start building that next level, when they bring up what happened in the past, what we try and do is bring them to the center. We try and say things like, thank you for sharing that. Yes, we know what happened to you with dad. You got sent to the boarding school and it was Arizona and the time was 4 o'clock and the building was blue. And I say that to you because they've identified that as their identity. So they remember everything and it becomes engulfed in them. So they're not listening to anything you're talking about. So what we try and do is say, thank you for that, but we got to move into what we're doing now. So let me ask you this question. What does the next 90 days look like for you? And that's a hard question to answer because they want you to stay with them on their ride of self-pity back to that day where it says, look, I was a little boy and I was 14 years old, and they get this look in their eye where it's like, uh-oh, because what's going on is they're trying to rally the troops and group. And what we're trying to do is get them to stay on the top of the discussion, which is, what's your 90-day goals? Simple as that, right? So ASAM criteria looks at 6 dimensions of this assessment. So you can look at all the dimensions, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. But this helps us diagnose them for either inpatient and or outpatient. So are they in dimension 1 where there's this intoxication and withdrawal potential? So do they need detox? And then after 14 days of detox, they would transfer into an inpatient setting for 90 days. And then after the 90 days, they could really benefit from an outpatient setting from anywhere from 90 days to 180 days, and then go to aftercare. Now, the reason why we keep it simple with people is because if I'm sitting here and you're going through acute, intoxication where, you've been drinking all day long, or you've been smoking weed for as long as you can say, or like I said, the guy had 3 different things he's been doing. If you start saying you're going to be in aftercare in 6 months, the guy's going to walk out. That's just a standard fact, right? But when we get to that dimension 4, where it's readiness to change, right? And we try and look at the level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4, and we see if there's an opportunity where they'd be willing to attend an outpatient setting. Then what you've done is you've planted little seeds for change. You're not saying that you got to be this. I say this all the time, and please write this down and take this, use this. And anytime you're working with, I don't know if you work with clients or people that are in the social emotional health field, but I tell this to guys all the time. I primarily work with men. I don't have any clients that are women, but I primarily work with men. And I say this all the time. Look, this is not a forever thing. Okay. This is a for right now thing. So we got to get doing it right now, or you're never going to get out of the rut you're in. Right. And I say this often. No one cares how you got in the ditch, right? We got to get you out. So if we stay on the ladder of the ditch, we keep going back to all the things that happened to them, we're missing the main point, which is to get them to stop using, get them to a place where they can be safe, get them into like a therapy where maybe they're meeting with them once a week or 3 or 4 times a week. It just depends. And then get them to a stage where they can grow and be okay with just being okay. And for some, like the guy that I told you about that's in his apartment and the woman's talking to him, he hasn't been okay for a long time, but like I said, his readiness to change, it sways back and forth, right? Some days he wants to change and he says, oh man, the tidal wave, right? Of the past, the fear, the present, what's the future look like? How can I live without using it or drinking? And I got to tell you a little secret that I know about him that I'll share with you guys. He's had a stint at sobriety where he was in an anonymous 12-step program. And he stayed clean and sober for about 1.5 years. And you want to know a secret? Here it is. It was the best that his life has ever been. And he's only admitted it to me one time. And I was flying him to a residential treatment facility in Ohio. And he got so poetic in the flight that he told me this. And I said, oh boy, you exposed one of your biggest secrets to me. And a guy like me, I will take that and I'll use it at the right time and say, hey, you know, maybe staying abstinent, maybe you're one of those guys that you just lost your privilege to use and drink. And maybe, just maybe, you shouldn't use or drink for the rest of your life and your life will get better. I want to tell you that if I were to say that today, Windex bottles getting thrown at my head. I'm not trying to make you laugh. I'm just saying that it's a time and place for everything, right? So my goal today is to get them into an outpatient setting and or detox. So after we go through the diagnosis process, ASAM, we're here, then it's placement. So outpatient setting, we're looking at treatment groups one to 3 times a week for CUD. Intensive outpatient could be anywhere from 3 to 6 times a week. Now, most places aren't open on Saturday and Sunday. So when I say 6 times a week, that might be, hey, Wednesday morning, you got group at 11 o'clock. It's an hour and a half long. And then you're going to meet your peer support specialist for 30 minutes. We're going to work on some of your little goals list you had. And then after that, you know, Bob, the therapist, wants to meet with you just for a 15-minute check-in. They've had 3 sessions in one day. Now, I want to tell you why we do these types of things. We do them because this is somebody that when they leave that building, they're getting on their TikTok, they're getting texts from their friends, and they're going right back to whatever life they lived before they walked in. So you're basically trying to discipline somebody who's extremely undisciplined, okay? The structure of these programs help out with that. So I'm going to go through detox for CUD in the outpatient settings. This was just kind of a breakdown. So detox is typically 10 to 14 days. It's a setting that assists the client with a start in the recovery process. Some cannot or will not stay abstinent without the aid of an inpatient component. So detox is a must. And I'm even saying this with marijuana. And here's the goal. It's to assist the client with an outlet so they can transfer to an outpatient setting. And most, when they get in this detox setting, they say, if it wasn't for this place, I don't know if I would get it. I just don't. Now, 10 to 14 days is based off assessment and the criteria. And also, here's the main part, the need. I've had people say, you know, if it's 7 days, you know, I don't think that's long enough. I really need like 2 weeks. Well, you know, 2 years ago, 2020, our place was so packed that we didn't keep people for 14 days. We were around the 7 to 10 day mark because everybody know what happened in 2020. And towards the end of 2020, going to 2021, these numbers rose to the point where, just like Joe talked about the ER, we were just flooded with people who needed help, right? But we're held to a Medi-Cal standard, right? And that means that in California, you have to have Medi-Cal in order to attend treatment in an outpatient setting. That means we can only have 12 people in a group. Now, take a county that's got 3 million people, and now you're going to break up groups to where only 12 can fit in. It's a tough task. Oh, and also, the county of San Diego, which we have county contracts, you can't have a waiting list. So what are you gonna do about that? That's very overwhelming. So let's look at residential. So a residential program, it could vary. It could be 30 days stay or 90 days. It's in between. And a lot of the times, every facility has its own, thank you, Jim. Every facility has its own process. I've been asked in these presentations, what do I think is the best? Again, I'll answer. It's based off the need of the client. We used to say that everybody was cookie cutter, but I have to say this, okay? If somebody that I meet has been using for 10 years, how do you take 10 years of use and slam it into a 90-day, retention? So that means for 3 months, you got them. And then after that 3 months, you might not ever see them again. Here's how you do it. 1 group at a time, 1 session at a time, and we have amazing people that work for us. And what they do is they get in there and they make use of that time to try and reach them. The other part is that maybe the person has to be ready for that change. And I would say a lot of people don't like to hear this, but Joe's heard this many times. It takes anybody anywhere from 12 to about 24 treatment episodes before they're ready to change. Adults. So what that means is, and I'm being very candid, open. I feel like you guys need to hear this. That's getting arrested, going to jail. That's 2. Getting arrested is an episode. Going to jail is 2. Going to an outpatient setting, meeting with a PO, and the count goes on. And then they start getting to that like 12th, 15 episode, and they start going, okay, I can attend outpatient. I'm good. I don't want to use anymore. I'm going to listen to my PO. And I kind of want to see my family at Christmas this year. So I'm in February. I'm on track, right? And I see them start to slow down and say, I think I'm good because whatever happens when I drink or do drugs, it's not good, right? Residential is where we pinpoint these ideas. So this is why I say it covers the whole spectrum of everything. Again, the goal is to help the client become grounded and make the best plan for change. Simple. Next is outpatient, which I covered. But outpatient is less intense. The client will have many positive options for treatment goals, but also too, this is where you can still go and live your life. You can work, you can see your kids, you can still function in your hobbies. But then people say, well, hey man, I've been using for 10 years. So my only hobby was doing that. So I don't really know what to do. Then we start getting into all these amazing, things that the services are provided. So treatment groups, individual counseling, education workshops, social activities, gets the person prepared for what was life like before you started using, and what were you doing? What were the one of my favorite words is positivity, but when I say what were some of the really cool hobbies that you had, and what's fascinating about people that drink and use drugs and become dependent is when they come out of it, you really meet people who are just like you and I that happen to have a brain disease beyond their mental control. And given the right set of tools and the right stance and the right ideas and the right people around them, they become who they were always destined to be, just really amazing people. And I've seen legions of people that I've met in 20 years and 23 years in recovery field. Really, I've met many, many, many people who have recreated their lives and have become phenomenal people. And there were always those people, but staying on that line that they were on was never going to get them where they wanted to go. So it's kind of an amazing thing. So in the treatment field and treatment providers, we get to see that change, so and this leads me right into client engagement. So this is, like I said, this positive environment where we get to see them grow in their own way and likeliness. And it's really amazing. And I keep talking about client-centered care because each person's individual. And like I said, I've been doing groups since 2003. And I heard a pitch from a guy who had been doing groups for 40 years. And he said, sometimes you got to walk into work and you got to act like it was the first day you ever got a job as a SUD counselor. When they used to call us, you ready for this? They used to call us drug counselors. Isn't that great? Hey, I'm a drug counselor. Nah, that's why they changed the name a little bit, because it was so kind of slap you in the face. Even for me is the thing. I look at my first card I got, and by the way, I still have my first business card. I'm a collector of things, and I look at it, it says Pat Foley, drug counselor. But to me, that was important. That's why I kept it. It was a kind of a milestone in my life, because I was helping people see, hey, come to these groups, maybe attend some other groups outside of here, and you might just get to reach all your goals in your life, And then I would always pitch to people, hey, and you can always come back here and work, be my coworker, And in fact, a lot of people have. There's a lot of people in the recovery field who have a story and are in recovery themselves, clean and sober, abstinent, whatever you want to call it. I always touch on this because I think it's important, and it's not touched on a lot, but it does happen on a regular basis. Urine testing. So the matrix that we utilize it's the most widely used drug testing method, and it's suitable for multiple testing goals. It has a detection window of up to about 6 days, and the length of detection is right here. So let's focus on marijuana. So the moderate use 4 times a week, you're looking at 5 to 7 days. If you're a chronic user, so we just basically break that down as to a daily user, this is 10 to 30 days or greater. But with the higher potency products, we used to see, somebody who smoked on a regular basis with anywhere from 2 weeks, tops 3 weeks, 10 years ago, this would be completely out of their system. marijuana, you would have what they call a negative test. Negative test for drug testing is a good thing. It means that you have nothing in your system. Now with the higher potency products, especially those concentrates, you're looking at anywhere of 8 weeks, 9 weeks, and then the 8th, 9th, 10th week, it's kind of there, and you can tell there's no new use, but it's still lingering, right? And yeah, it's a process because there's loved ones and or guardians and or school districts that are saying, hey man, it's still positive. Like, are they using? And the truth is they're not. They haven't used in a long time. It just stays in the system a lot longer than it used to. But I thought I'd share that because it's a big part of treatment outpatient. There's a lot of parent support because what we know and loved one support, I should say, I should change the title of the slide. It's really a time for the family to engage in what's going on, the big change. And so that we can hear their perspective, but also too, instead of, like I said, staying in the past, looking for the future. I'm going to cover the mental health and CUD. I'm being respectful of your guys' time. I see where we're at and kind of break down the mental health disorders that I witness and what we do and how we utilize it. So here are some of the disorders I see with CUD. Schizophrenia, I'm going to jump right in. We're seeing a lot of triggers of young people anywhere from 19 to 21 dealing with living life on life's terms and the idea that I got to move out of my parents' house and I got to pay all my bills, and I'm making $2 more than minimum wage, and I got this cannabis use disorder. I got this heavy issue of smoking. So I'm going to tell you that anxiety is going to jump through the roof. And what happens is the stress from moving and stress produces more using produces more stress. And we're seeing a lot of cases of schizophrenia, maybe that was onset. So it wasn't, something that was going to happen, but because of the use, it happened. I know Joe touched on that. I see a lot of depression, a lot of, I just don't want to go anywhere today. This is something I see on a regular basis. And I really, when I say this to you guys, I'm really trying to help them, is I give suggestions like, hey, I need you to do a couple of things before I see you the next time. Okay, yeah, anything. Well, I need you to try, I'll see you in 2 days, but I need you to try, as soon as you walk into your apartment, I need you to go brush your teeth, and I need you to try and take a shower today. You don't got to do it right away, but I want you to go rinse off. And a lot of the times when they come off of using massive amounts of marijuana, they just get into the state where they just don't care, and here comes the big thing. Ready, guys? And here's some of the warning signs of mental illness. Why do I need to take a shower? Who am I going to talk to? I can't get a girlfriend. Hey, do you know that I haven't been on a date in 2 years? So I don't care. I don't have any money to get my hair cut, so why buy deodorant? Actually, I can't even afford to, buy food. So I can't afford to buy deodorant, And it seems to be that maybe they're in a pity party and they're not. Really what they're doing is they got some depression, they got some heavy stuff going on, This slide is really for you guys. So if you're working with people or you see this, it's very true. All the points that are here. I see that a lot of the times they're dealing with the fact that they ruined their lives, and here they are, and how could they get out of this? They don't see a way out. So like I said, this is a perfect slide for being in crisis, where they're at currently, struggling and going back. So they go from in crisis to struggling to surviving, right? And then I show up and I try and get them to that thriving and that excelling, which is outpatient settings, after you've attended an inpatient setting, and trying to work on those goals. But more importantly, staying abstinent one day at a time. And for some people, it's this suggestion. Hey, if you don't want to go to outpatient settings, you don't want to go to a 12-step program, you don't want to do any therapy, then just try and stay abstinent for the next 90 days. Don't use, drink, or do anything, especially cannabis. And let's check in every day and see where you're at. And I find them that when they don't go towards the help, they stay in the crisis and the struggling and then the survival mode, right? Distracted, withdrawn, worried, nervous, always looking for something, just everything. And if you look at this, poor sleep leads to very poor activity,
And if you have like a structured environment, like most of these, clients have, where they have to, think about it, if you're anywhere from 18 to 25, let's say if you're in school or if you have a job. So good luck about being in crisis, you're struggling, you're staying absent from the drug of choice you've used for a long time. And now you gotta, kind of hit your daily activities. It's gonna be tough, which going back to brushing your teeth, they don't have time for that because they're really in the first three here. So mental health disorders. So we got cannabis use has also been linked to depression and anxiety. Cannabis users are significantly more likely than non-users to develop temporary psychosis, long-lasting mental health disorders, including schizophrenia. And I'm not going to say schizophrenia is the worst one. I don't even know if the gentleman that I'm working with, if he has that. What we can't tell, and I'm sharing this as a candid moment, is a psychiatrist can't tell, is he suffering from delusions from the marijuana use and or alcohol and tobacco all in one? Or is he actively schizophrenic and that's his psychosis that's going on? So here's the thing, he's got to stay off it long enough for his psychiatrist to do med management, right? Which med management's like, let's try this med, we'll check in 10 days, but he can't stay off it. So what do you do with that? My point is as a parent, do you say, you know what, I'm going to throw the towel in because he just doesn't get it? No, you know what you do? You take it one slice at a time. Here's where he's at today. And going back to this important slide, I'm sorry, this one. When someone's in crisis, the worst thing you could do is throw in the towel. When they're struggling and they're trying to survive, the worst thing you could do, thank you, is throw in the towel, right? The only way to get them to that excelling is to never stop trying to help them. And I can tell you that it's easy to drop them. It's easy to move forward. It's easy to do all those things, but to really help them when they're in their time of need, they're never going to forget it. I'm going to go to life after CUD to kind of like the recovery and when they have those breakthroughs. And in personal development, which is what we're doing with them, it's skills for success in life, the goals, visions, and dreams, like I talked about. If you're stuck in the past, you're always going to be pulled that way. Their goals and dreams have to be so big that it pulls them into the future. That's how big it has to be. And the reason why we get so excited is because if you're not excited as the treatment provider or the life coach, they're not going to trust or listen to anything you have to say, right? So here's personal development. It's very important. 3 parts: spiritual, physical, and mental. And then steps to success for CUD. They have to have good ideas. They have to have good plans. And then this one's really tough for them. It's tough for us living day-to-day activities, the passing of time and structure. It's Wednesday. It's going to be Wednesday all day today. It's the only thing. You can't get to, the 12th grade if you're in the 9th grade. So they're going to have to go through a lot of things in order to get to where they want to go. Like I said, you can't go from the 12th grade at the 9th grade. There is no jump. There is no fast track. And what they say is, I just don't want to feel this way anymore. I just want to have all my friends back. I want to be able to talk to my dad, and I need money in my bank, and I need a car. And can we do it today? No. It's called instant gratification, and it doesn't happen. And that's part of the, problem solving. And then staying abstinent. Super important. Like I said, if you can't do anything, do that. Stopping alcohol or any drugs, especially cannabis, and try for 90 days. Try and do it on your own. And if you can't, you need help, let's go there. And what I start seeing is that there's this movement that happens where they say, okay, I did it for 4 days and I smoked again. Please don't be mad at me, but here's where I'm at. I need help. Okay, great. And they identify that. Growing stronger. What I see is a momentum happening. And all of a sudden you see somebody that was struggling in their first 90 days. Now they have 6 months. Then you get to see them celebrate a year. And I'm telling you guys something that's really cool. I got a text from a guy today while Joe was presenting, and he said, hey, I want to thank you for helping me with my sobriety. And he says that today he's celebrating 9 years. Wow. Right? Here's a guy that rolled up to treatment with a bicycle, with a light taped to the bicycle. Okay, now he wasn't 20 years old, 9 years ago. So he was a full-grown adult strolling up to, treatment with a bicycle, no shirt on. Now, for San Diego, it was really hot. So luckily you could kind of make it with no shirt on and a bicycle and a light. But it's because people start to thrive in their life, And they're not just miracles, there really are a lot of success stories. I would like to go to Q&A. I'm gonna invite Joe to come back with me, and then you can sit in the captain's chair if there's any questions that we want to take.
Thank you for staying with us for the 2 hours, for those of you who stayed. I'll wait for Annabelle to see if there's any questions.
You guys are also welcome to unmute if you do have any questions as well, because I'm not seeing anything in the chats.
You're very much welcome, Annabelle, to share our emails. I know, that California's been in this for a while. We have some good data about public health. I know Illinois is recreational as well, but we've been in it a little bit longer. So if you want to share our emails, we'd be more than happy to offer any kind of help or resources with anything you might need.
And there was a comment from Carlos. Carlos, you by all means, you can have our slides. Joe and I share our slides on a regular basis. By all means, please take it and utilize it.
All right, and I will be sending the recording as well once we get everything done. So for those that had to hop off early, that way we can get that taken care of. And also, I don't know if you guys know, but Artruse Wilson is on here with us today, and they're from the state of Illinois.
Oh, great.
So, yeah, so I kind of saw that on there, just that I kind of pitched that out as we were kind of talking about comparisons.
Well, thank you again, Annabelle, and to your colleagues that are on the call.
Yeah, IHEC has been a great partner. Great series of webinars too.
All right, so it doesn't look like we have any questions, so I just want to wait a bit for that. Yeah, if anybody has questions, they can also email me as well, and I'll be sending out a survey to the group for those who did participate with the registration, just, kind of giving a rundown of, what did you learn, how did you find it beneficial, things like that. And if you guys want that feedback as well, I can.
Yeah, that would be great.
Let you know. Yeah, thank you all for attending today, and we're really thrilled to have you here. Keep posted. IHEC will be having a lot more webinars for the rest of the year. I think the next one I've got slated is probably beginning of March, so keep posted for that, and we will stay tuned.
Thank you, Annabelle.
Thank you, guys.
And you guys have a great week.
You as well.
Bye.